Hello and welcome back, dear Heartbreaking Talks listeners. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee or tea, and let's start. Story 1. Wife cheated before we got pregnant but told me after. Am I right to leave? I know every person and situation is different, but I want to make sure I'm not overreacting or being unreasonable. My wife, 25, of 1 year told me, 30, last week that she slept with 2 other men on separate occasions over the course and for a month before of our marriage. We got married in March of last year. We had our typical stresses about the wedding, but to me, that seemed normal. However, due to some outside obstacles with the house we were living in and my parents, who were overbearing, we didn't get off to a great start. The problems with the house were bad enough that we ended up moving and buying a house in May. That's when I noticed some issues. She seemed disconnected from me. We both traveled for work quite a bit during this time, at least one of us for 3 weeks out of the month. While the grind was tiring for me, I was always happy to come home to her and our pets. But it never seemed the same the other way around. Eventually, in September, she told me she wasn't coming right home after a work trip and rather was going to take a weekend by herself. Upon return at the end of the week, she told me she was done and wanted to move. Me being the non-controversial person I was, I acknowledged her wants and accepted it as what would happen. But as we approached the holidays, she began to change and wanted to try us again, so I went along with that because it made me happy. And we found out in January that we would be welcoming our first child. All this sounds great, but there were things along the way that didn't make sense and always made me kind of suspicious. The weekend she didn't come home, randomly going out on Friday nights when the majority of our friends are couples and rarely do one-off activities without other couples, but the kicker was a Friday night in January when she wanted to get out of the house because I'd been home so much more and she needed space, so she rented a hotel room in our home city and stayed the night there. Major red flag to me, but again, me being me, I didn't say anything. Fast forward to a few weeks ago when the curiosity got the best of me. I had asked on at least 2 prior occasions and gotten denials, but she finally admitted that she had been sleeping with other men. One a coworker, which started while leading up to our wedding and continued for many months after, including a trip to law which I paid for her to go on as a birthday present. Oh, and the random weekend not coming home, random nights out, and the hotel room night. Another guy she had met and slept with on multiple occasions. This all blindsided me. We are barely a year into our marriage, just bought a house, and are expecting a newborn soon. I have my doubts that the baby is mine and already plan on getting a test ASAP. But am I wrong for having no interest in fixing our relationship? To her credit, she does seem incredibly heartbroken and remorseful that she did these things and hurt me, and says she understands my decision to not want to fix it. But I have no idea how I can believe her in this scenario. So my ask is this. Am I in the wrong for seeking a divorce and co-parenting if the child is mine, given these circumstances? What do you think about this, guys? Let's talk about next story. Story 2. I was cheated on and years later, I cheated too. It's given me a lot of perspective and a lot of remorse. My wife was a serial cheater early in our relationship. She never established boundaries with any man who gave her positive attention. She cheated online at least 4 times that I know of over the first 7 to 8 years of our relationship. Additionally, in the back of my mind, there are a few more that I'm highly suspicious of but never could produce any hard evidence of. At least one of them, 4 to 5 years into our relationship, got as far as her making real-life plans to meet up, exchanging pictures, voice chats, and some very graphic messenger logs that I found. She created a Facebook account and connected with him as well, so I'm sure way more correspondence that I wasn't privy to happened. Additionally, she tried to monkey branch to that same man years later. I found it, confronted her, and the blame was thrown on me. It was my fault. I wasn't attractive enough, I wasn't in shape enough, I wasn't attentive enough, all kinds of things like that. It hurt, but I internalized and wanted to try to make things work for a variety of reasons. One of the things that hurt the most was that we had a dead bedroom leading up to this and, honestly, after it. I felt simultaneously neglected and frustrated, like I wasn't good enough, but that someone, somewhere else, was good enough. I wanted to figure out how to be good enough. I wanted to figure out how to unlock the feelings in her that she could have for these other people for me. I actively started seeking out forms of external validation as a result. I'm not using this to excuse my actions. I have my own issues unrelated to this, but I turned to anonymous online erotic roleplay. Entirely fictitious, no real-life details, names, or pictures were ever shared, but nonetheless crossing a boundary. In my head, I didn't liken it to cheating. I thought of it as a way to try to make things work and an outlet for my sexuality in our dead bedroom, while trying to remain loyal and trying to work things out with who would become my spouse. She didn't agree, of course. I understand why. I tried to stop and would go years between going back to these things, but did a couple of other times as well. Eventually, issues with our dead bedroom would manifest, or my wife's behavior would change, and I would be convinced she was having another affair, and rather than having the courage to confront or break things off, I got inwards and bitter and down on myself and began looking for external validation again. I tried to get in shape, I tried to make myself better. I didn't always succeed, but I did get in the best shape I'd been in since high school. I was slowly working on becoming a better person. I did succeed in some facets and didn't in others. But that feeling in the back of my head of the things my wife told some of these men never left the back of my head. Anytime she would say she was having lunch with people at work and I'd see the credit card logs, or she'd hurriedly alt-tab out of something when I walked into her office at home, I would get those suspicions. She started using VPNs and Tor browser, the passwords to her accounts changed. I gave her the password to my phone, but she apparently didn't believe me when I did and decided instead that she needed to look over my shoulder to get the very password I'd given her. At some point, our sexual frequency picked up a bit, but never in a way that made me feel attractive. At various points in our relationship, she had told me not to focus on her pleasure and simply get off. And so, sex was on a timer. If it went on too long, we would have to stop. If I tried to pleasure her, she would get frustrated and self-conscious. Likewise, if I took too long, she would make disparaging comments about my performance, and there were some physical issues that I spoke to a doctor about and was beginning to have anxiety around. I would get in my own head and make things worse. I won't claim I was the best lover either. It was hard because I almost never received feedback and it was short and impatient. But I absolutely could have been better too. We both got into bad habits that were detrimental to our relationship. Regardless, I wound up having an emotional affair relatively recently. Someone online gave me positive attention, complimented my appearance, seemed actually interested in sex and a sexual relationship. I should have said no, but I didn't. The attention and actually feeling desired after a long relationship with someone who seemed sexually repulsed by me and that my libido was an inconvenience made a volatile mix. Much like her, online discussions were had, pictures were shared. We flirted with the idea of meeting up, but I drew a line that I wasn't actually willing to cross that boundary in my relationship. A week or two after it escalated to a point that I knew was improper, it made me convinced that I needed to decide to leave my relationship. I was unhappy and clearly easily able to be led astray. I owed it to my ex to leave. Not to start a relationship with my AP, but to simply pull myself out of my current one. I had a conversation with my ex and failed to get across that I wanted to separate. Regardless, though, I had lost my desire to have sex with her, and she took that, and given I'd always been the higher libido of the two of us, naturally looked at my phone and found out about my emotional affair. I'm not looking for pity. I'm merely venting, but what has followed has ripped off a lot of old wounds. I've talked a bit to my therapist about how I almost judge myself more harshly because I know how it feels. I did what I never got from her, at least. I told her that I apologized and that regardless of what happened in the past, she didn't deserve it. I know that doesn't make up for it, but I owed her at least that much. I'm eaten up by regret and remorse. I wish I'd had the presence to end things a bit earlier. Maybe doubly so because I know what it's like to be cheated on and what it does to your self-esteem. Ironically, she outright denied ever having one, much less many, improper relationships with men. She flat out denied it to my face. When I confronted her with evidence, memories of pictures and names of partners, she did it again. She trickled-truthed. She only trickled-truthed to confirm the things I specifically mentioned. Then she also threw in my face that I wasn't actually hurt by any of it and was just making it up to deflect blame. And that has only convinced me of one thing. She had way more of them that I didn't know about. I wonder now, how many and how long? Were all the times she encouraged me to go out of town her being an understanding spouse or a means to get me out of the house? Were all those lunches with her co-workers grounds for affairs? Was her impatience with me and her direction to ignore her pleasure because she was getting it from someone else? I'll never know, but after getting the things I knew for sure about denied to my face, I'm no longer giving her the benefit of the doubt. If nothing else, I was honest with her and myself that it happened and apologized for it, and that she can't even be honest burns me up in a way that's impossible to fathom. Don't get me wrong, her cheating doesn't vindicate mine. I will never give myself that excuse as an out. I was frustrated about things in my relationship with her, sure, but my actions were my fault. I should have left beforehand. She even blamed me for marrying her despite her cheating. I guess maybe that was my fault. I thought I could move past it, and I thought I could get over these things that have crushed my self-esteem, but I didn't. It didn't eat me up on a day-to-day basis, sure, but it didn't take much to dredge up feelings of inadequacy and the fear of her cheating again. The fact that she immediately jumped into another relationship only helped to cement that feeling. But it's something I have to just swallow and get over. However, her anti-cheating crusade in the meantime has introduced a level of anxiety and frustration that's very hard to communicate. That someone can tell me that it happened so long ago that I should have gotten over it, while also exclaiming that they'll never get over what I've done, has ignited a level of frustration at the lack of introspection it takes to rail on my infidelity while hand-waving their own. I can take solace that at least I apologized, and at least I could be honest. I've talked with my friends, my family, told them, with varying levels of detail, not everyone needs to know everything, the context of what happened. My mistakes, hers. Like I said, I'm not looking for pity. I just want to vent. Mock me if you want, it won't hurt more than how much I've beaten myself up. I wish I'd had the strength to move on before I escalated to the point I did. I love her, and it feels awful to have done such a thing. And it also feels similarly awful to have her do one last invalidation of my feelings to help herself be mad on the way out. I can't change the past, but I wanted to give insight into things that went through my head and my experience, as well as just venting having been both cheated on and having had an emotional affair as well. We were both young, naive, carrying with us significant childhood trauma when we got together, and that definitely played into us both likely getting into and staying in a relationship that didn't seem particularly healthy for either of us. I carry a lot of frustration and remorse. There are a lot of things I wish had gone differently. I wish I hadn't cheated. I wish I had worked on my own self-esteem and attended therapy earlier, tried to get my own issues addressed, and tried to push her to do the same. I wasn't a great partner and absolutely had my own share of misgivings and things I should have done better. All I can do now, I suppose, is try to make myself better going forward. I can try to learn from my lessons and build my own self-confidence and self-love, while also trying to understand and come to terms with all the things that brought me to where I am. The best I can do is be open and honest with myself and try to move forward. Story 3. Once a cheater, always a cheater. My wife and I have been married for 5 years, together for 6 years. We have 3 beautiful children, they're all 100% mine and hers. Our marriage is wonderful and honestly life is amazing. Last week I found out she cheated on me in the beginning of our relationship while we were still dating. About 4 months from when we first met. This was over 5 years ago, and I met my wife when she was really young, she was 19. She had been keeping this from me our entire relationship marriage, and I had to pry it out. The quick version of this is: about 4 months into our relationship, we were still dating, not married or engaged. She abruptly broke up with me for 3 weeks. I always thought this was odd. Well, it makes sense now. She was hanging out with a guy she met at work and they ended up having sex 4 times. Turns out there was a week overlap between me and him. Meaning, she had sex with him 1 time while still dating me and then 1 week later broke up with me. Turned out this guy wasn't what she thought and came back to me 3 weeks later. I pried every detail about this story from her and then secretly tracked down the guy and their stories line up. I'm shocked, hurt, angry, sad she did this to me while we were dating. I know she was really young at the time, but I could never see myself doing this to anybody, ever, at any age. Plus keeping it from me all these years. I've heard the saying once a cheater, always a cheater. Should I be worried about the future? I feel as if I'll carry this scar to my grave and I'll always have to be slightly looking over my shoulder. As if my trust and perspective for her will never truly be 100%. She's very motivated to make this as right as possible and she's spent many nights with me talking, doing whatever she can to help me. Also, figuring herself out and working on why she made these decisions on the first place. She seems truly devastated and hates she did this. Thank you all for reading and commenting. What do you think? What would you do? Thanks for joining me on Heartbreaking Talks. Check out more good stories on my other channel. Love you all, brothers. Cheers.